Morning my brother got engaged, my mother cried happy tears at the dinner table. She reached across and held his hand like he had just survived something terrible and come back to us. She looked at his fiancée and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart. You're going to love being part of us." She did not look at me once. I was sitting 3 feet away. I had driven 2 hours to be there for that dinner. I had brought flowers for the table because my mother always said, fresh flowers for the table because my mother always said fresh flowers made a home feel alive. I set them in the vase myself, the one she keeps by the window. She moved them to the counter before we sat down because she needed the space for the breadbasket. That was the kind of thing I had spent 29 years telling myself did not mean anything. I grew up in a house where love was not divided equally. It was not even close. My brother, 4 years older, louder, always the one with the story everyone wanted to hear, was the son our family orbited. I was something else. Background. Furniture almost. I was the one who got good grades without anyone asking, who had a job at 16 without being told to, who never called home drunk from a party or needed to be bailed out of anything. My mother once told me when I was maybe 12 that she never had to worry about me. She said it like it was a compliment. It took me another 15 years to understand it was not. My father left when I was 8. My brother was 12. In my mother's memory, this was something that happened to my brother specifically. He lost his father at a critical age, she would say. He needed extra support. He needed her more. I was younger. I was resilient. I would be fine. I was not fine. I just did not tell anyone. By the time I was in my mid-20s and working as a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company in Cincinnati, I had built something I was genuinely proud of. I was not rich, but I was stable in a way that felt hard-won. I had a one-bedroom apartment I loved. I had savings. I had a routine. I had a few friends who actually knew me, not the version of me I performed for my family. My grandmother, my mother's mother, had passed away when I was 24. She left behind a trust, not a huge amount of money, but meaningful. She split it between my mother, my uncle, and the grandchildren. My share came to just under $40,000. The stipulation, which my grandmother had put in writing, was that the money was meant to help us with major life milestones: a home, a wedding, education. My mother was the informal trustee, not legally. My grandmother had not been that formal about the paperwork, but she was the one who held the account information and managed the disbursements. My uncle had his own portions separated from the start, but ours, mine and my brother's, were commingled in a single-family account that my mother controlled. My grandmother trusted her to do right by both of us. I added to that account. That is something I want to be clear about. Over the course of about 4 years, starting when I was 25, I contributed an additional $11,000 of my own money. I transferred it in installments. My mother kept a handwritten ledger which she had shown me once when I asked. She said she was keeping track. She said it was all there. I was engaged at 28, his name was Daniel, and he was steady and kind and thought I was funny, which I had never taken for granted. We were not planning anything extravagant. A small venue, maybe 80 people. We had sat down and done the math, and between what we were saving ourselves and what I expected to pull from the account, my portion of the trust plus what I had added, we figured we could have a wedding we were genuinely happy with without going into debt. I called my mother to talk through the timeline. This was about 14 months before we wanted to get married. I wanted to give plenty of notice. I said I was thinking about starting to plan, and I would need to access the account soon. And could we sit down and go over the numbers together? She got quiet in a way that felt different from her usual quiet. She said she needed to talk to me about something. She said my brother had gone through a hard stretch. I knew some of this. His restaurant, a fast casual place he had opened 2 years earlier with a business partner, had been struggling. He had come to my mother for help. More than once, apparently. She said the account was lower than it had been. I asked her what lower than it had been. She told me. I sat on the floor of my kitchen for a long time after I hung up. Not crying, just very still. The number she gave me was less than $9,000. Combined. That was what was left. From an original balance of over 50,000, my grandmother's trust plus my contributions, 9,000 remained. My brother's restaurant debts had taken the rest, dispersed in chunks over the previous 18 months, while I had been working my job and putting money in and assuming everything was where I had left it. I did not call her back that night. I did not call her back that 3 days. When I did, I asked one question. I said, "Did you use my contributions to pay his debts?" She said it was a family account. I said, "That is not what I asked." She said my brother needed it more. She said I had always been capable of figuring things out on my own. She said she was sorry I was upset. She was not sorry. I knew the difference by then. The engagement did not fall apart over the money. Daniel was angrier about it than I was, which surprised me and also made me love him more. We restructured. We scaled back more than I wanted to. We moved the date. And I started doing something I should have done years earlier, which was write everything down. I requested a full accounting from my mother in writing. She stalled for 6 weeks. When I pressed, she sent me a handwritten summary that did not add up. The numbers were inconsistent with what I could piece together from my own transfer records. I had kept every receipt. I had kept every text message where she acknowledged receiving deposits from me. I consulted a family law attorney, not to sue her, though she told me I had grounds to pursue a civil claim for the misappropriated personal contributions, but mostly to understand what I was dealing with. The attorney said the trust, as my grandmother had structured it informally, would be difficult to litigate. My personal contributions were a stronger case. She said the question was whether it was worth it to me emotionally and financially to pursue it. I thought about that question for weeks. Meanwhile, my mother called regularly, not to apologize in any real way, mostly to tell me how stressed my brother was. His business partner had walked out. He was considering closing the restaurant. He was devastated. She would describe his emotional state in detail, and then she would end the call by saying she hoped I understood. She said family took care of family. She said I knew how sensitive he was. I had not asked to be told any of this. But I listened, every time, and said very little. And she seemed to interpret my silence as forgiveness moving toward her on its schedule. It was not. My brother called me once during this period. He did not mention the money directly. He told me about the restaurant. He told me about how hard he had worked and how unfair it had been and how the location had been wrong and the market had been wrong and his partner had been wrong. He talked for almost 40 minutes. At the end, he said, "I hope you're doing okay. Mom says you're stressed about the wedding stuff." He said it the way you say something you have been told to say. I said, "I'm okay." He said, "Good. You've always been the strong one." I had heard that my entire life. The strong one. The capable one. The one who would be fine. It had always been handed to me like a gift. It never was. It was permission to need less. It was an excuse to give less. You do not have to tend a plant that waters itself. The wedding planning moved forward in a quieter way than I had imagined. We found a small venue we loved, an old converted farmhouse about 40 minutes outside the city. We brought the guest list down to 63 people. I made peace with most of the changes. Some of them I even preferred, honestly, once I let myself stop mourning the version I had planned in my head. My mother offered to help plan. I told her I appreciated it and that I had things under control. She offered again. I said the same thing. She told her sister, my aunt, that I was shutting her out. My aunt called to check on me, and I explained, as calmly as I could manage, what had actually happened with the account. There was a long silence. My aunt said, "Oh, honey, I didn't know." I believed her. That was almost worse. About 2 months before the wedding, my mother called and told me she thought we should get together. She said she wanted to be part of the process. She said she did not want things to be cold between us. I agreed to meet her for lunch. She came in looking bright, which I had braced for. She gave me a hug that lasted a beat too long. She said she was so excited for me, and she meant it in the way she always meant things. Genuinely, in the moment, without a clear accounting for what had come before. We ordered. She started talking about the wedding. She had ideas. She had been looking at centerpiece options online. She asked if I had finalized the flowers. She asked about the rehearsal dinner. I let her talk for a while. Then I said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it. She stopped. I said, I know you love me. I'm not here to argue about that, but what happened with the account was not okay. You took money that I put in specifically for this, and you used it without telling me, and when I found out, you told me I would figure it out. You have never once called to say that you understand why I'm hurt. You've called to tell me about his situation, every single time. She started to say something about my brother's struggle. I put my hand up. I said, I'm not asking you to stop loving him. I'm telling you that I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. I need you to actually say that you understand what you did, she cried. My mother is a good crier in the sense that it is always real. She does not manufacture it. She sat across from me with her eyes wet and said she had thought I would be okay. I said, that's not the same as saying you understand. She said it again differently. She said, I should have asked you. I should have called you before I did anything. It was not a full apology, but it was the first true sentence she had said to me about it. I sat with it. I did not let her off the hook by saying it was fine because it was not fine. But I also did not leave. We finished lunch. I told her she could come to the wedding. I told her I would not be talking to her about money again, ever, and that I was keeping my own accounts from now on, and that if she wanted a relationship with me, she had to understand that I was no longer the one who would just absorb things quietly. She nodded. I could see her processing it, the way you process something that does not fit the shape you have made for it. The wedding was in October, the farmhouse was lit with string lights and smelled like wood smoke, and it was the most beautiful night I have had in my adult life. Daniel cried when I walked in. My best friend gave a speech that made everyone laugh and then made me cry. My grandmother's best friend came and told me she would have been so proud. I thought about my grandmother a lot that night. I thought about how she had set money aside because she wanted to make sure I had a foundation. I thought about how it had been taken and whether she would have been heartbroken about that, or whether she would have just said, well, you got here anyway. I think she would have said both things. My mother was there. She was appropriate. She was kind to Daniel's family. At the end of the night, she held my face in her hands and told me I was beautiful. I believed her and I let her. And I also held on to what I knew, which was that love and accountability are not the same thing. And she was going to have to learn to offer both if she wanted to know me. My brother did not come to the wedding. He said he had a conflict. I did not ask what it was. About 3 months after the wedding, my mother called to tell me my brother's restaurant had officially closed. She said he was devastated. She said he was talking about moving back in with her for a while. She said, and I remember this clearly, that she hoped I could find it in my heart to be supportive of him right now, because family was family. I asked if she remembered what she had said to me at lunch. She said she did. I said, then you understand why I don't have a lot of capacity for this right now. There was a silence. She said, you've always been the strong one. I said, I know you think that's a compliment. I need you to understand that it's not. I got off the phone and I stood in my kitchen. The same kitchen where I had sat on the floor after her first call. And something felt different. Not resolved, exactly. Not healed, but different in the way that happens when you stop waiting for someone to see you and you start just seeing yourself. I consulted with the attorney again a few months later. I ended up sending my brother a formal letter through her office, documenting my personal contributions to the account and requesting repayment. Not the trust portion. I had accepted that would be a longer fight with uncertain outcome, but the 11,000 I had transferred myself with records attached. He called me furious. He said I was being vindictive. He said he'd been going through a hard time. He said I was weaponizing the legal system against my own family. I said I was weaponizing the legal system against my own family. I said, you spent money that was mine without asking. I'm asking for it back. That's not vindictive. That's accurate. He said, Mom always said you were the one who had it together. I said, she said that so neither of you would have to think about what I needed. He hung up. He did eventually pay me back. Not all at once. Not without my attorney sending a follow-up and not with anything resembling grace. But it came in 3 installments over 7 months, and I deposited every one of them into an account that has only my name on it. I do not have a perfect relationship with my mother now. I do not think I ever will, and I have mostly stopped hoping for the version of her that would fully understand what she did. She loves me in the way she has always loved me, selectively, from a certain distance. More when I am not inconveniencing her picture of her family. I see her a few times a year. I am polite, I am warm even sometimes, but I stopped performing. I stopped making it easy for her to forget. The thing about being the capable one, the strong one, the one everyone assumes will be fine. It is a story people tell so they can stop paying attention. I let them tell it for too long. I treat it like a compliment. I internalized it until I started believing that needing things was a character flaw. It is not. I know that now. Daniel and I have a savings account we contribute to together every month. We have a shared spreadsheet that we look at on the first of every month. Together, over coffee. We talk about what we want. We do not assume. We do not leave things to someone else's goodwill. I know exactly what we have and where it is and what it is for. My grandmother wanted me to have a foundation. I built one. It just did not look the way either of us probably expected. But I am standing on it, and it is solid, and it is mine. I used to think being called the strong one was just a personality observation, like someone noticing you have brown eyes or that you are good at parallel parking. Neutral. Just a fact about you. It took me a long time to understand that it was never neutral. It was a permission slip. Once you are labeled the strong one, the capable one, the one who will be fine, people stop checking, they stop asking. They redirect their worry and their attention and, as it turns out, their financial responsibility toward whoever needs it more visibly. And you are left to absorb whatever is left over, quietly, because that is what strong people do. My mother did not set out to hurt me. I genuinely believe that. She loved my brother in the specific, anxious way you love someone who has always seemed fragile to you. And she loved me in the distant, relieved way you love someone you have decided does not need much. Neither of those is real love fully. But she did not know that. She had been doing it so long it had become invisible to her. The same way you stop noticing the sound of traffic after you have lived near a highway for years. What she did with that account was wrong, not complicated. Wrong, wrong. Or situational, wrong. She took money I had contributed in good faith and used it for something else without telling me. And when I found out, her first instinct was to explain my brother's circumstances rather than acknowledge mine. That is a pattern, not an accident. Patterns are choices that have been made so many times they no longer feel like choices. The consequence of that pattern was not something I engineered. It unfolded the way these things tend to, slowly. And then, all at once. My brother's restaurant closed, the money was gone. The relationships that had been built on the assumption that I would always absorb and adjust began to show their actual weight. When I stopped absorbing, when I sent that letter and held that boundary at the lunch table and said clearly what I needed, the structure my family had built around my silence started to shift. That is not revenge. That is just what happens when something load-bearing is finally, honestly assessed. What I learned, not as a lesson handed to me, but as something I had to excavate slowly from under years of compliance, is that intelligence without self-knowledge is not very useful. I was competent. I kept records. I had receipts. I knew how to function. But I had not been honest with myself about what I was participating in every time I accepted the strong one label without pushing back. Wisdom is not just knowing things. It is knowing which stories you have been told about yourself that are not actually true. And endurance, the kind that actually helps you, is not the same as absorbing. Absorbing is passive. It is letting things happen to you and calling it strength. Real endurance is what Daniel and I practice now on the first of every month. Over coffee, looking at a shared spreadsheet with both our names on it. It is unglamorous and ordinary, and it is one of the most honest things I do. My grandmother wanted to give me a foundation. The people she trusted rerouted it, and I built one anyway, from what was left and what I earned and what I finally learned to protect. That is the version of strong I am willing to be now, not the kind that makes it easy for people to forget about you, but the kind that makes it impossible for you to forget about yourself.